if you look at Santa Claus, it's basically a red guy, a fat guy in red and white dress, riding reindeers and dropping gifts and going through sky. So it said that Amanita muscaria ultimately, ultimately inspired the pagan ritual, which ultimately inspired the story of uh, Christmas and Santa Claus.
Finally, we are doing this and we are super excited. Ansh and I have been contemplating and, in fact, procrastinating for long that we should start a podcast series. We also, wrote it in our bucket list this year on our calendar that we should start our own podcast. But we could, never really take out time because we were trying to shift to a remote area in Uttarakhand and embrace the slow life. And we approached Sharad to be the guest on our podcast, and he was really kind enough to readily agree, and we are really grateful to him. So we met Sharad on mushroom related Facebook groups where he was trying to help amateurs like us trying to grow mycelium, biofabricate mycelium products, or even help them identify what kind of mushroom it is. So yeah, so that's when we actually started talking to him and got to know more about him. So Sharad is a self-taught multidisciplinary citizen scientist. He's a researcher and he has keen interest in mycology and he has been experimenting with it and its applications. He in fact actually has one of the largest private cultural banks in India with over 120 fungi species, and some of them are really exotic and fancy. So on this podcast episode, we not only talk about fungi, we talk about theories like Panspermia, but the most important takeaway from this episode is that what we learn from Sharad is that how to live a life, driven with or driven by curiosity, and that is what we rediscovered. And I hope you rediscover your curiosity, which might have taken a backseat as life happened to you. So we really hope that you enjoy this podcast episode and enjoy the interesting conversations. I wanted to start with a fun question. Suppose you were a mushroom, like which species would you be? Like,
Oh, which I haven't actually thought about this, but probably Ganoderma.
why do you think so?
I relate to it, man. It's a sturdy mushroom. It grows in a lot of conditions
Very
and
resilient.
even very resilient. Even though it causes disease, uh, it also provides a lot of benefits to
I
the
see.
ecosystem. So yeah, it's kind of the anti-hero of mycology.
I see. Interesting.
Yeah, it's responsible for a lot of wood waste turning back into compost and returning to the soil ecosystem in forests. So yeah, Ganoderma,
True.
I guess.
Great. So, how do you
Yeah,
introduce yourself usually? Do you introduce yourself as a researcher, mycologist, or an
I
artist?
I don't I don't really like to put like labels on things because until 6 years ago I wasn't a mycologist. I was a banker. I was selling loans, and that time label on me was a banker, and before that I was a computer science engineer. So before that the label was computer science engineer, but I don't like to like conform to any label. I'm just like a really curious guy who knows nothing else but to like follow my curiosity and see where it goes. So I don't want to say I'm strictly a mycologist. I'm very much interested in other life forms. For instance, algae is something that I'm working on right now. So Yeah, but like fungi are my you can say true love. But yeah, but fungi have actually got me interested into so many other microorganisms that we totally ignore, because like humans are very visual heavy perceptors, right? So we mostly analyze visual data, and because we can't see viruses, bacteria, fungi, algae with our eyes, we tend to ignore them as, everybody keeps talking about save the world, plant more trees, do this. But like trees are responsible for only about 8 to 11% of oxygen, and 90 to 80% of all oxygen comes from algae, right?
True, true.
And nobody talks about like save algae, right? Nobody talks about like let's go do something for the algae. So yeah, man. Like I don't want to put a label on myself. I'm just a really curious guy who's had the luxury and I can say just had good luck that I'm able to pursue my curiosity, and I can take it in a direction where I can actually do deep dive about organisms.
True. So, like you said,
So yeah,
nobody
mostly
talks about. Yes, sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, go ahead.
So, like you said, nobody talks about these organisms and nobody talks about algae, and there's this negative notion about them. So, what do you think like people picture when they hear fungi?
Yeah, because see, fungi again. You People have been scared of fungi, and rightly so, because if you misidentify a fungi and consume it, or interact with it in a way that you can be exposed to certain toxins from them, then it's only natural, because our ancestors had no way to identify a poisonous mushroom from a non-poisonous one. And so you'll see that the knowledge of fungi and mushrooms, even in India, in villages, is very specific to villages, and they have their local names for those fungi. They know which ones our ancestors have eaten and they've been fine, and which ones have killed them.
True.
So they don't examine it. And this is very localized. Like within villages, you will see different names for the same fungus. So the knowledge of good fungi, bad fungi for us has traditionally been like, consume and see if it kills you, and that's how you know. So there is the fear behind fungi is reasonable, and that's why there's a lot of fear when it comes to these organisms. Viruses make us sick, bacteria makes us sick, fungal infections are really hard to fight off. Consume the wrong mushroom, and it could go anywhere. So the fear uh, is justified, but that shouldn't stop us from examining these organisms for resources, useful resources, which might benefit us humans and our ecology. How we can use defenses that fungi uses against viruses, bacteria, how we can use those same defenses to fight off diseases. So they are of a lot of interest now, but traditionally they have been inducing fear in people, and slowly that's going to go away. Like people are going to find out more good things than bad things about these organisms, and that's how perception changes. So hopefully with time this will change. I mean, you and I are talking about like benefits of these organisms, right? These
True.
conversations are going to spark more curiosity and further more conversations, and hopefully over time this misconception about fungi goes away, and we start seeing them as like just another organism that is living alongside us, has been existing for far longer than we have existed. So it must have a lot of evolutionary knowledge on how to survive, how to thrive in different conditions. Fungi are found from in ice. Fungi have been found in comet samples.
Oh, that I
So
didn't
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. Fungal spores have actually shown to survive the radiation and the pressure of space. So that's there. There we have examined. And we found amino acids and other things on comet, which are sign of biological activity, and these could be attributed to both bacteria and fungi. From so panspermia is actually a very it's a it's a credible, I won't say credible, but it's a theory that is being examined, which means that so panspermia basically says that maybe all of life did not start on Earth, but like maybe fragments of early life landed on Earth through comets and meteorites, and the right conditions and the right timing basically started this chain reaction of biological and chemical activities, of which we are results. We are, after all, colony of bacteria, fungi, viruses who somehow gained a sense of identity and an ego, and we have given ourselves names. But most of our DNA is not human. It's actually, it belongs to the viruses, fungi, and bacteria that reside on us, right?
True.
So yeah.
So, like for me, also last year has been a learning curve. Before that, the notions I had about fungi, whatever they say, like is was
Yeah, potato, potato.
yeah. So it was like either fungal infection on one side of the spectrum or button mushrooms. That too, I hate like eating in my food. Before, like I got into this world of mushrooms, getting to know how old the organisms are. Like now, you say that maybe inception of the whole humanity or something like could be
Yeah,
traced
yes,
back to it.
absolutely. In fact, scientists are examining it now. Now that humans are venturing to Mars and Moon and other places. So, fun fact, like we actually detected these amino acids on certain comets, and after that, the after finding amino acids on these rocks, we've actually quarantined all the moon rock samples and the samples we're going to receive from Mars, because uh, be- if they can survive passing through Earth's atmosphere, burning at a very high temperature, uh, at the atmospheric pressure, and still surviving, then uh, scientists have now decided to actually quarantine any sample we receive from Mars and Moon. So yeah, panspermia is a very credible theory that has been looked at as origin of life, because we haven't been able to find Luca. So Luca is this mythical creature that started life, all life. It's the last unknown common ancestor. So,
Yes.
according to Darwin's theory, life started with this one organism and then branched out into like this complex tree of different complexity, biological complexity. But we've never been able to find Luca, like in rock samples or in fossils. Now, one possibility could be that Luca existed so far behind in time that finding its fossilized remain is virtually impossible. It could also be that we just don't have the technology to, look for it, or we haven't found it in the right places, or we haven't looked at it in the right places. The third possibility is that maybe there is no Luca. Life already started in these different fragments like bacteria and fungi, and then branched off, and maybe that one organism did not ever exist on Earth. So that's something we're not quite sure of. We don't know a
But
lot of things, and
but it is super intriguing. Like I didn't know about this theory and it's like quite enlightening and I'll definitely
yeah,
be
I
into
I
this.
highly recommend you Google
Yeah.
panspermia and Luca. In fact, there's some pretty cool research material on it.
I just want to like go back in history, like to understand like how were you as a school kid? Like were you into biology and what experiences led you
No,
into
I dreaded biology. Yeah, I was a very bad student in school. I've never been a very good like I've never been very good with authority figures, right? And especially yeah, especially the like our education and at least mine was very ritualistic, right? Like you go to school and then the teacher will come and like open chapter one, biology of a cockroach, draw the digestive system of a
Yeah,
cockroach. And I just couldn't understand why do I have to draw? I mean, it's important to understand how the digestive system
right.
works, but like education was so ritualistic, like chapter one, two, three for test one. And then you read chapter one and you know the questions that they're going to give you. Like one is going to be like draw a diagram and then one question. So I was never very good at like, that in that pedagogy of education. I did not thrive in it. In fact, my earliest experience with biology and how I got curious about biology was when I was 4 5 years old. I used to go out early in the morning and like collect caterpillar from like different
Oh,
leaves and like find like a blue caterpillar and a green caterpillar, and I would go and keep them in a tub with a lot of leaf, right? So that they had things to munch on, and I would leave some spray it with water, make sure that they're there. But like, and my mom watched me do it, and she was fine for a certain while, right? But um, then every now and then, like some of these caterpillars would go missing, right? They would like randomly not be there. So and I didn't know that caterpillars turn into butterfly and fly away. So I kept thinking like my mother has a problem with these caterpillars, so she keeps like picking a few of them and then throwing them out or something like that. So I got really, really, angry with my mother once, and I told her my caterpillars are missing, and she tried to explain it to me like that's just how caterpillars are. They just go. That's just what they do. They turn into butterfly and they fly away. And I didn't believe it. I thought like she's making up this story because I've caught her. And but like then I read about it, and I like my mind was blown. I mean, and it's still blown. It still gets blown. Like if you see the entire metamorphosis of a caterpillar from like a caterpillar to a butterfly, that's every time that happens, that's a fucking miracle. That like it's amazing. It's amazing what is happening there. Right. So that I got fascinated by biology, but then when I went to education institutes and all, like biology was very it was all dulled down to like draw this diagram and remember this organ, and just a whole lot of memorizing. I wasn't good at it, so I gave up biology. In fact, I didn't take biology. I took physics, chemistry, and maths. I was good at chemistry and physics. I was decent in maths, and I barely qualified for like a decent college in for engineering. I went to JP, and there also by then I had totally lost interest or the sense of curiosity, right? Like by then my attention was like college life, freedom, and like to go ahead and enjoy. And so for 4 years I did my computer science. I barely learned anything. Oh, even though my college had one of the most one of the finest biotech labs at that point in time, JP University of Institute
oh,
of technology in Solon. It was one of the best, and I think it still is one of the most expensive private biology microbiology lab. But yeah, but I was just like in a very sheepish manner. I got a good rank in AIEEE, so I got computer science as my first preference, and because everybody else was taking computer science, so I also took computer science. I totally wasted my 4 years studying it,
I can
but I
imagine.
enjoyed like a lot of pure learning, so that was good. After that, I joined HCL for a while. I worked for all of 4 months, and then I quit. I said, this is not for me. I went back home. Father said, well, what do you want to do? I still had no idea what I wanted to do. So I said, well, I'm going to do MBA. So I wrote my cat. I got really good
So this
percentile.
is which year, if you could give a context, like which year, man?
Yeah, so this is, I mean, I got done with my engineering in 2011. In 2013, I joined IMT Ghaziabad to do my MBA in finance. Then I joined Tata Capital as a marketing manager there, worked for 1.5 years there. Felt horrible because I mean, I was selling loans at the end of the day, which is an extremely dull job. Not just dull, it's scrupulous. I mean, it's no banking is no place for somebody who's, who wants to lead an honest life. Don't go into banking if you want to like
That's
do
that's
everything
some
straight.
confession.
Yeah. So, but thankfully, after this, I had saved some money, and I was ready to start my business. And during this 1.5 years, I had gotten into gardening and growing plants and all. So I was doing hydroponic. I was trying to grow tomatoes, lettuce, rockets, and along with another friend, we started a company called Farmstats, and we started growing vegetables, bell peppers, cucumbers, tomatoes on a small scale, like 30, 40 kg harvest. And we started supplying to like local RWS colonies on like a Saturday market or a Sunday market. We started delivering to their homes. And then at some point in time, they started like people started demanding mushrooms. And I was like, okay, I can go grow mushrooms. I mean, by that time, I'd grown a lot of plants. So I was fairly confident. But I didn't realize that fungi are these whole different organisms, right? So in 2016, I started reading up about fungi. I realized that I can't grow this in the current setup. Like it can't be grown in a farm. You need completely different infrastructure to grow and work with fungi. So I invested in some basic equipment like this flow hood,
Oh.
microscope, an autoclave, and this is
So,
all in my house. So
but
I
before
converted
investing
one.
into this, like how much
Yeah.
research went into it, that you need these things, and like what is the
Yeah,
process
so
between
yeah, so
buying these things?
I got actually really lucky because around this same time, one of my friends who was studying genetics in Germany
Okay.
returned to join his family business, and he was working, and his family business is like milk. It's delivering milk. So he was working working to create a probiotic brand of milk in India, like Yakult. So Yakult is
Oh.
essentially milk fermented by a bacteria called lactobacillus. And so so he set up a small lab, right? And we were discussing that, okay, you're working with lactobacillus, and he too was interested in working with fungi. So I asked him if I could come and see his lab, understand a little bit, if he would teach me about like microbiology and some practices. And he was more than forthcoming. He insisted that you come. It'll be I'll teach you, and he did. So I'm still very thankful for him to give me that opportunity to like teach me basic microbiology. Because if I had gone to a college, it would have taken me 4 years to learn what I learned in like 4 months. Because college is a lot of bullshit exams and projects and shit like that. But actual learning is like 10%, 20%. So yeah, I got like really distilled and condensed information from him, and I he let me. He actually trained me in using a lot of equipment that goes into like pipettes, autoclaves, laminar flow hoods, centrifuges, PCR, uh, the microscope. I had no idea how to look at things under a microscope. So all this. So yeah, during those 4 months, I thanks to him, I got to work in that lab. And by the end of those 4 months, I was so fascinated that I had decided that I'm going to set up a small lab. I'm going to now start working on fungi and I think that was 2017, and from 2017, I've just been working on fungi. I've not grown a single plant in those 5 years now, 4 5 years. Yes, so only it's all been fungi and working with fungi. If you can see, this is my culture collection. So these are
Awesome.
over 120 different species of fungi that I've collected, ordered. Somebody has been kind enough to send those samples for me. So I've collected a lot of fungi, and some of them I haven't even got the chance to start working with. Some I've grown, fruited. Some I've bred. Some I work on breeding projects. Then there is Mycomaterials that I'm working on. Like this pot is completely made out of fungi and agricultural waste. As you can see, it's growing
So
really nicely in this.
for people who might be listening, say mushrooms and getting to know more
Yeah,
about fungi for the first time, maybe can you
yeah.
explain it in your own words, like how mushrooms or fungi is different from the plant kingdom and
Okay, yeah, sure. Fungi and plants are completely different from the way, number one, how they, get their energy and how they make nutrition. Actually, fungi and plants are complementary animals, complementary organisms, not animals, and complementary organisms. So plants actually use sunlight to make their food, and they essentially convert it into sugars and nutrients. And fungi are organisms that actually need these sugars and nutrients, and then they further break these nutrients down for plants in ionic form. So plants can only absorb nutrients in ionic form. They can't, right. So basically fungi take these complex organic material which they degrade through enzymatic, and it's amazing. They're almost like we work so hard to like find out enzymes that can break these things down, but fungi are so amazing that they can secrete different enzymes according to the materials they encounter. So they have ability to break down different kind of molecules, different the complexity of molecules, and then that's how they make these nutrients available to plants in a form that the plants can absorb, like in ionic form. And mushroom and fungi are mushroom is like a body part of the fungi. Like it's actually the reproductive body part of the fungi. The actual fungi is the mycelium, which we don't get to see. It's underneath the soil surface. It could be anywhere between one cell wall to 10 cell wall thick, depending on how it is. But if you dig under a mushroom, you'll find these white strands right at the base of the mushroom. That's the actual mycelium. And mushrooms are one of the ways that some of the fungi reproduce. And So plants make seeds, seeds fall down, under the right condition, they germinate and new plants come out. The same way fungi create spores. These spores are ejected, they're carried through wind. Other animals who eat these fungi, through humans who grow these fungi or carry fungi from one place to another. So these spores then fall, get carried through the wind, fall somewhere, and wherever the conditions are right, they germinate and start doing their own thing. So from spore, they go to hyphae, multiple. So each strand, each when a spore germinates, it's basically germinates into one long strand, right? And these strands then combine and then they crisscross, diverge, and form this complex network of a lot of hyphae. This is what we call the mycelium, which is the actual body of the fungi.
And why
And
is it called the
this,
internet of nature? Like there's been this notion
yes,
associated to it. So why is it called
yes,
so?
so this is we've only recently discovered that trees talk to other trees, right? And how this happened was that we started looking at trees that were sick, right? And somehow trees that got sick from a disease actually sent certain signals to other trees in the area,
Interesting.
which could then form some kind of defense against these diseases. And so scientists had to find out how these trees were communicating. And they found out that it's actually the fungi and the bacteria in the soil that actually react to another organism, which may be a pathogen attacking a tree, which secretes a certain enzyme, which acts as a bio marker or a signature, which then these fungi detect, and in and then they pass on these signals as to other to the mycelium network, through the mycelium network, so that they can make enzymes which can then defend against such infections. Not only this, it's also called the nutrient highway of the forest. So trees actually exchange, when trees make excess sugar, they pass it down to the mycelium. Mycelium in exchange take these sugars, convert it into enzymes, and give it back to a tree which may need it in the entire forest network. So they also act as a nutrient highway. In fact, during drought, it is seen that mycelium tends to channel water where water is required in a forest that is undergoing a drought-like situation. So they actually transport water from one part of the forest where it is not where it may not be needed, to a part of water where to a part of forest where this water may be needed. So it's not just the internet; it's also the highway through which the forest. It's also the mobile network. It's the actual forest is beneath our feet. When we
I
walk through a forest, we send these signals. The fungi know that there are organisms that are walking. In fact, fungi actually sense these as electrical signals. So every time you step on forest, you send these tiny electrical signals, and the mycelium network actually knows of your presence in a forest.
got it. So this famous mycologist Paul Stamets, he has said that
Yeah.
mushrooms will save the world. So do you agree, and how is that possible? Why does he say so?
If Paul Stamets was working on cockroaches, he would say that cockroaches will save the world. So I don't even know what that means. This term "save the world." Like, save the world from what? From what? Who? Which world? Because and it's such a egotistical statement to make. Save the world. It's I don't think mushrooms can save the world. I don't think anybody can save the world. Did you read the IPCC report that
Yeah,
just
man,
came out? That
it is
yeah,
horrific.
so we are going to amuse ourselves to extinction. I don't think because any tool that can save the world is not as big as or immense as human stupidity, and I think we're going
True.
to like amuse ourselves into extinction, which is fine. I mean, I am not interested in saving a particular species or saving the world, or I wouldn't go as far as saying that mushrooms are, cure all, or they are the solution to all our problems. They have their own utility, and yeah, I mean, look, Paul Stamets is also a businessman, right? He's selling his supplements, he's selling a lot of things. So we should take his words with a pinch of salt, but he's not completely wrong about all of it.
So, what are
He's
the
maybe
possible use
exaggerating
cases?
the so use cases. Like I said, so I was working with. I mean, let's look at all the beneficial compounds we already know which come from fungi, right? Penicillin, the first antibiotic, it came from a fungi. Cyclosporin, the drug that we use for organ transplants. If we did not have cyclosporin, organ transplant wouldn't be possible because your own immune system would reject it. And cyclosporin is an immunosuppressant that suppresses your immune system so that when somebody else's organ is transplanted, your immune system doesn't throw a fit. So we've already, I mean, beer comes from, alcohol comes from yeast, and we've curd and cheese and all these things, these amazing, magnificent, tasty things have come from fungi, right? And we're only just finding out that we can make materials which can, maybe hopefully replace plastic, or at least take some of the burden away from plastic. So there are so many uses, and we're only just beginning to find out. So there's this ant, a leaf cutter ant, and it harvests a particular fungi, and it has been cultivating that fungi for millions and millions of years. Like they actually cultivate that fungi, right? And here we are, we need like autoclaves and laminar flow hoods and sterility to like culture fungi, right? But here are these ants who've just been cultivating this fungi in open air, right? And with great success. And they form this
Yes.
symbiotic relationship with this fungi. So scientists realize that to actually do this, they must be producing some very complex antibiotics, right? Which are working against a host of different organisms so that only this fungi is thriving, right? So we and that could be a great source of so we're getting super bugs, bacteria which are resistant to traditional antibiotics that we know, right? But we can go back to fungi and look for like these novel antibiotics that could be much more broad spectrum, and then they can they can maybe help us understand how to design antibiotics better in future. So sky is the limit when it comes to what could fungi be used for.
So, apart from say medicine, we have like packaging. Maybe there's some research
Right.
going on in the food industry for maybe some vegan products.
Absolutely.
And then
Absolutely.
there's
Absolutely.
this research going on with leather also, if I'm correct.
Yes. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
what do you think is the scope in cleaning the environment as the terms go, like mycoremediation and mycofiltration?
Yes, so mycoremediation has its limitations. I mean,
Can you
what I've
explain
realized,
it
we
a
found,
bit what it
yeah,
is?
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So mycoremediation is basically using fungi to remediate a polluted either land mass or a water body. So like I said, fungi, how they go through their nutrient is they start growing on a substrate, and depending on the chemicals they encounter, they'll secrete these enzymes to break down these chemicals into simpler chemicals that they can then utilize, right? And if they can't, they hyper accumulate it in their tissues. So let's say there is a oil spill, or say there is a industrial area with a lot of industrial discharge that could vary in complexity, chemical complexity, and all of this is currently like we have some waste stream where we're just dumping this waste, right? So the idea of mycoremediation is like using fungi at different stages of this waste disposal to lessen the pollution, and to also basically accumulate these hyper accumulate these harmful chemicals like arsenic, cadmium, complex hydrocarbons that can go into our river, choke the oxygen supply into the water body. So the
Yeah.
idea is that we can basically combine different kind of fungi which specialize in consuming different type of waste streams, and using them as stage filters we can filter them. But and it has shown good success in lab and small scale setting, but the problem is that we're producing so much waste at such a scale that we it's currently not practical that to treat so much waste with fungi. And but we definitely can use or remediation, or as we say mycoremediation, uh, in tandem with other processes to minimize this waste stream. So they definitely have a role to play in waste disposal and reducing soil toxicity, water toxicity from chemical and industrial discharge.
Got it.
Research is being done. In fact, that we found a couple of fungi that are able to break down plastics, but those
Yeah.
are currently in specific conditions, and creating those specific conditions for a large scale, like our landfill in near Azadpur or Rai. Yeah, there's so much plastic that you can't process it and
True.
that way. So yeah, but we're looking
It's a
at it.
start.
The
Yeah.
the science, yes, it's a start. Once we know what enzyme is actually breaking down the plastic, that that enzyme can that be then we can find out which genes are making those enzymes. Then we can maybe take those genes into an organism like yeast or E. coli, like a bacteria. We can get them to express that enzyme, and then maybe that organism can do the same process at room temperature instead of that. So there's a lot of research going on, and hopefully if there are enough people who get interested in it and who take this research up, within a decade we'll be able to find some solution.
Got it. How much important do you think self education or say open shared recipes and knowledge
I
sharing
think I
is
think that's
for
that's the
mycelium?
future of I think that's the future of education. I think within a decade, we'll realize institutional education is completely useless. Education will be in future curiosity dependent, and only the high quality educators would survive. So you can already see that. Why should I? I paid about in excess of 14-15 lakh to do my MBA, which is basically you going into a lecture hall, and you're given a HBR, Harvard Business Review case study, and you basically bounce off ideas with each other for 45 minutes, right? No lab is required, no expensive equipment is required, no nothing. And I currently have to go to a college, and if there are like five good professors, there are 50 bad professors, and I have to unfortunately take those take classes of those 50 stupid professors also who I don't want to listen to. I mean, they're not, frankly, they're not good enough to become teachers. So I genuinely believe that the future of education is going to be, self-education and curiosity driven, right? And self-paced. Self-paced is very important. Because I mean, how we fucked up the education system is unbelievable. We made it instead of like, uh, in the whole education system should be about gaining knowledge and skill sets, right? But here it's just about like qualifying that some criteria, it's become
Right.
very ritualistic, test one 60%, test two 90%, CGPA 8.2, and that just becomes the whole point of college, like CGPA and then like placement. It's become very ritualistic. In fact, all life, that's one of the things that turned me off, and I decided I'm not going to live my life ritualistically. I mean, I've done enough rituals or whatever I owe to society. Go to school, do your 10th, do your 12th, then do your college, then get a degree, then get a job, then do a master's, then get a job, then get married, have kids, and then have grandkids, grandkids, and then retire, pension, insurance, all that. Like, life has been broken down into like set of rituals, and everybody kind of is drifting through these one ritual after another and gets disappointed when some rituals don't go through it. So I I decided that I'm not going to live my life in rituals, because rituals did not bring me happiness. Like, I wasn't happy at my job. I wasn't happy selling loans to like corporates. If I kept doing it, I would be a really unhappy person. But like society would see, oh, good package, works for a big four or a big, Fortune 500. But I mean, what it comes down to is like, is it even going to make you happy, right? Because I mean, 60, 80 years in like a universal time scale, blip in time space. So are you really going to like live your life just completing these rituals? Or
But that's the trap
so
of the
I
rituals.
mean, for me, it's been like a, yeah, that's the trap of the rituals,
And
man. So
and then
and you have
I'll
to
be
very
happy.
consciously and exactly. Like, if I finish this ritual, then I'll be happy, right? I mean, if you're earning 50 lakh before you're 30, then you've succeeded in that ritual. You've aged capitalism
Yeah.
and all that shit. So yeah, man. Like, I decided I'm not gonna like do that. Life is very small, and I am very driven by my curiosity. Like, if I have an answer, and if I have a question in my head and I'm not looking for answers, then I just get agitated. So I guess this is how I am. It might not be the case for everybody, but I do think, like, to such a huge we've got such a huge population, and we're just kind of blindly trying to educate everyone. Like, what? Like, by the time I passed out, I had studied C++, but like everybody had moved to like C sharp or Python or technologies which are right. So it's
True.
if I mean, your textbooks are only going to be as good as how soon they're updated, and that's just not possible with textbook based education. It has to be online, where data is refreshed constantly, new discoveries are published and verified, and so internet is going to be the ultimate college of the future. People are going to like get curious, go on YouTube, go on Google, search for fungi, search for, then probably stumble upon resources, because that's how I studied.
So you're optimistic about people accepting, say, things being made out of mycelium. Do you see a market in India, like it's a
Yes,
mass
yes,
market?
yes. I know there is a market. I know there is a demand. I know. In fact, the only thing stopping is a supply gap. There's
I
so much
see.
demand, but like I said, uh, upscaling it from lab to industry scale, that is where the real barrier is. And then, so a lot of people are working on mycomaterials, biomaterial, bacteria based. materials, but it's all at a lab scale, right?
True.
I can make one pot, but if I want to
Mm-hmm.
sell this pot, I should be able to make like a million units, right? So that is where we are currently, but I am sure in another 5 to 10 years, this would have been done by either one of the companies I work with or by somebody else. But I am very sure that there are enough number of people working on this problem that it will be solved within the next decade, and we will see a lot of mycomaterial in the market, and we will be adopting a lot of mycomaterial. Like I'm growing pot, I have this ashtray that I use. So yeah, there's plenty of application. There's there we made some lamps prototypes. So there's so much. We made some yoga blocks. So
I
we're
see.
slowly, yeah, trying to figure out how we can mass produce these objects. And so right now the objective is to go to the businesses because they are the major consumer of thermocols. Individuals don't really buy anything made out of thermocol other than say you buying an ice box or maybe moving a house and you're packing, and then that's the only two times you need thermocol and other plastic based, right? But
So,
industries use it every day, like they need it, and they are the consumers. So the focus is right now to cater to these businesses, and once we get more capital, more R&D into it, we can transition to consumer durables and consumer goods.
so without getting like too much technical, can you explain why and how a mycomaterial is made and why it is a
Absolutely.
sustainable
So
alternative?
right. So I'll tell you why. Because see, we are already generating a lot of agricultural waste, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, agricultural waste, even in nature, if you let, I mean, if you examine the nature of agricultural waste, it's ultimately plant based. So it's either the stalk, the leaves, and how we're doing it right now. Either we chop it off, if an animal can consume it as his feed, then we send it off as an animal feed. if if it's not, we try to find some other use, and if it's not, and if all of it can't be used, we tend to burn it, right? So burning is where the problem starts, right? It releases all that carbon
True.
that it had captured as organic material back into the air as CO2 and carbon monoxide. So now fungi naturally degrade cellulose and carbon-based organic materials, right? If I didn't cut off my my agricultural waste or I did not burn it, it would ultimately start decaying on its own by fungi and bacteria and microorganisms in the soil, right? So what we can do is we can consciously do this process, and that results in biomaterial. So what we do is we basically take this agricultural waste and we prepare it in a way that it can be consumed by a fungi. When mycomaterials are made, it's nothing but fungal fermentation. They actually go through the organic material, and when they go through it, they extend their hyphae branches. The mycelium binds it, and once it done binding it, we can stop the growth of the fungi, and by sterilizing it and get a material that is hardened, that is inactivated, and at the same time that has properties which are useful to us. So we can make them wood like, we can make them foam like, we can make them leather like. So different processing methods can result in different kind of material, all coming from the combination of fungi and agricultural waste. So if I were to if I were to give pointers for somebody at home, it's basically you take any agricultural waste that you have, you chop it down and mix it together. Then you add water to it, hydrate it to, because fungi need water to uh, to metabolize. So once you hydrate it, you sterilize it. Sterilization is a process where we kill all other organisms which may be alive, active on the agricultural waste, because it was growing in open air, and open air is filled with billions and billions of microorganisms, both in vegetative form and in spore form. So through sterilization, we deactivate all these organisms, and then we take a select fungi, the particular strain that we want, and then we introduce it to the agricultural waste in a sterile environment, in an environment where no other microorganism is present. Once the inoculation is done, we move our bags to a place where we can give ideal conditions for this fungi to go through the substrate to colonize it. Once it's colonized, we break it apart, we put them into molds, and then we let them do their secondary growing in those molds. And then we demold them, demolding and deactivating the material, which is done by mostly drying it. Once it's dry, that material is ready to be used as either packaging material or as a pot, or as a lampshade, whatever utility it was meant to serve.
Thank you. So, what are some possible agriculture waste, like if you can maybe throw light on some of them?
In fact, I haven't come across an agricultural waste that you can't use in this
I
process.
see. So,
Yeah.
from
So if
straw
it's
to hemp,
from
wood
straw to
chips.
hemp to wood chips to seed hulls to tea leaves to tea powder, coffee powder, spent coffee powder, to compost to cocoa coir. Uh, I've used multiple materials to varying degree of success, but so far there is nothing, there is no agricultural waste that cannot be used to
So,
make my materials.
have you tried, say, sugar cane or say corn cobs or things like that?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely,
it works on
absolutely.
that too.
Like I said, it works with varying degree of success, and one agricultural waste may be better than the other, but that doesn't mean that it can't be done. So basically, if you give a certain nutrient profile, combine different agricultural waste in different quantities and combination, you may be able to successfully make a micro material out of it. So some may be, but like I said, not a single organic material that fungi that I haven't that fungi can't grow on.
So, have you come across any such ancient practices that revolve around
Yes,
mushrooms in India?
yes. In fact, the oldest reference to a mushroom is in a religious text, Somras. So Somras, the supposed concoction that Indra consumed, contained a mushroom, which is now believed to be Amanita muscaria, which does give you dissociative effects when you consume it in the right condition. So there is a reference to a mushroom in preparation of that somras, and so yeah, so like, I mean that should tell you that there is a known use case of mushrooms in our literature, in our ancient literature, but from that point on, there is not much reference to mushrooms in our texts. Even in Ayurveda, mushrooms aren't as explored as plants are for their medicinal properties. There's a very small and ambiguous section in Ayurveda that is concerned with mushroom, and it is also very vaguely. So yeah, so I mean, I mean, ancient culture-wise, India, there's not much reference to mushroom, but like you said, South America, China, Korea, Japan, these places, have had mushroom as an integral part of their civilization and evolution as a society.
Fascinating. So you brought up Amanita muscaria. I think that is the most depicted mushroom,
Yes, yes,
and
yes.
it's
It's
like the
it's the
flag
Mario
bearer of
mushroom.
mushrooms. So
Yes.
why do you think is that the case? Like, is it because of Mario, or like, or was it some other influences that made
I
the
I think so. Amanita muscaria is one of the mushrooms that is mentioned in a lot of culture. Like I said, Soma, Indian culture makes a reference to it. The Russian folklores mention Amanita muscaria, red mushroom. So, in fact, Santa Claus is ultimately said to uh, be inspired from this mushroom. So in Siberia, shamans would consume this mushroom. They would actually feed it to a reindeer, and then the reindeer would metabolize it and excrete it in the form of urine. And the shamans would drink this urine, get high on these compounds, which are primarily muscamol, which gives the dissociative and hallucinatory effect. So they would get high on this molecule and then have visions and then pass on those visions as prophecies to their tribes. And it is said that through this pagan ritual, Santa Claus is based. If you look at Santa Claus, it's basically a red guy, a fat guy in red and white dress, riding reindeers and dropping gifts and going through sky. So it said that Amanita muscaria ultimately, uh, ultimately inspired the pagan ritual, which ultimately inspired the story of uh, Christmas and Santa Claus. So yeah, it's a very revered mushroom in different civilizations. It's also a toxic mushroom, by the way. So if you don't know how to prepare
So,
it
so that's my next
correctly,
question. Like, if you
yeah,
that people say that mushroom hunting is a very skilled hobby, like, so
yes, absolutely.
what
Perhaps
are
one
the
of the
skills
most
that go
skilled
into?
hobby.
So, what are the
So
skills that actually go into hunting mushroom?
the number one skill for a new forager is to know where to look for them, right? Because
Mhm.
mushrooms tend to remain hidden from our eyes, and they so you need to first of all understand when is the right time to go see them, where would they likely be coming out of, and then comes the part of identification, which is very tricky when it comes to mushroom because so many of them resemble each other and are completely different organisms. One can cure you of some disease and the other can kill you. So these three skills, and when it comes to identification, there's so many organs and so many things that you have to worry about, right? So from the habitat, what habitat is the mushroom growing in? What is the texture? What does the cap look like? What are the gills like? What are the stalk like? Does it have a veil? Does it not have a veil? Is it growing in November? Is it growing in summer? Is it growing in this season? Is it growing in this particular wood or that particular hillside? So many variables, and unless you know how to ID a mushroom positively, you should never consume wild mushrooms. And with mushrooms, the issue is by the time you realize that this is a mushroom toxicity, it's usually too late. They take about 10 to 15 days to actually start showing effects. So these toxins actually go into our digestive tract. Through the digestive tract, they get mixed in our blood. Then the blood carries that toxin to all our different organs. And by day 10, day 11, day 12, every organ starts shutting down, and before you reach the hospital there are multiple organs which are shutting down, and then there's
Damn.
no way to save you. There's literally no way. So and so if anybody ever has a mushroom toxicity, or your dog or cat or your anyone has consumed a wild mushroom, you should you can actually go to a forum on Facebook. It's called Poison Control Helpline. It's a place where top mycologists, top plant botanists, top toxicologists are there on the forum, and they'll help you identify what mushrooms, if they might be toxic, if what is the right course of treatment, if you should, rush to the hospital or not. So, and believe it or not, we get about 4 to 5 cases every day that we need to figure out. Like somebody's dog has had some mushroom, somebody's baby has picked up a mushroom and consumed it. So yeah, every day 5 to 6 cases of people
So
consuming wild mushrooms out of
the
curiosity or
group
misidentifying them.
the group you mentioned is helpful, but I think you have also cautioned me before, like don't try wild mushrooms
Yes,
unless until
I
you're
caution
thousand
every
percent
I caution everybody.
sure.
I say collect wild samples, and there is a right and wrong way to collect fungi. When you go out collecting fungi, do not pick up mushrooms whose caps haven't opened yet, because the ultimate purpose of a mushroom is to spread spores, and if you would pick a mushroom before it has spread its spores, you would be stopping its reproductive process, and that can ultimately affect the overall population of that fungi in that area. So yeah, do not eat wild mushrooms. Collect them, ID them. There are learn to ID them. IDing is a whole different universe in itself. Taxonomy is very complex. I still have trouble IDing a lot of it.
So what are some life lessons that you have learned from fungi as an organism?
Oh, life, plenty of life lessons. You can, grow, excel in shit. You can pretty much grow in any condition, if even if somebody it's the biggest lesson is that life goes on. You cut a fungi, you move it to a different plate, it starts growing there. And you can also see a lot of you can see a lot of parallels between human society and a fungal network, right? Like how cities grow, like they start off in a center and then keep
Mhm.
expanding, and converting all the resources that are available in that line. It's very similar to how fungi colonize media plate. So there are a lot of parallels. I don't know. I also learn from a lot of other organisms also. But yeah,
Interesting.
fungi have
So
their own.
something I tell myself is like, like be like mycelium, either keep moving yourself or you lose yourself kind of thing, like you have to keep
Yeah,
learning or
that's
that's how
that's
this
a very
thing.
good lesson. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
very good lesson to take from them.
So apart from fungi research and mycology, like what books have inspired you and like are you an avid reader? Like you keep reading
Oh
other
no,
kind of books?
I'm not an avid reader. I can tell you, I've read George Orwell
Mm-hmm.
a bit. I Even the books that I read are academic in nature. Uh, I'm reading this book called Behave by Robert Sapolsky. It's a very fascinating book about human behavior and biology of behavior. Basically, what happens when inside our bodies, when we are happy, when we are sad, when we are angry. How our moods work. One moment you can be dancing and then you get information, and something inside you completely changes. And so it's interesting to learn about like the biology of behavior. So that's a very interesting book that I'm reading. One of the best books that I've read is The Gene, which got me really interested about and gave me a very crude, fundamental understanding of genetics. It's called The Gene. It's by an Indian author called Siddharth Mukherjee. I highly recommend everybody that book. It's so interesting. Talks about our evolution and how. I mean, if you read that book, you would start to see yourself as only a vessel for transfer of genetic material. It's all about like all life is about movement of genetic material from one form to another. So it's these are some of the books that I've read. I haven't read Harry Potter. I haven't read any of the fiction. I mean, I somehow I am not interested in fiction. There's already so much interesting stuff in reality that I want to understand. So my reading habits are again curiosity driven, like all my other actions are. If I get curious about growing a plant, I'll probably buy a book about growing that particular plant and go through it. So it's my reading is mostly academic to satisfy some inherent need to understand some process or some organism. So it's very specific to that. Other than that, I don't really read books. I don't really read newspapers, magazines. I don't think anybody does anymore. But yeah, so my reading is mostly to research papers and academic, academic natured book. I wouldn't say the gene is academic or behave is academic, but yeah, they are of that nature.
Got it. I've been always curious about your Instagram handle, Charles
Okay,
Bakwaski.
that
Why
that
have you
that's one
kept
of
so?
the yeah because I love. In fact, his poems have really helped me on like bad days. You know, there's this poem called Factotum, Go All the Way.
Go all the way.
So yeah, it's his.
Or don't
Yeah, it's
even try. That's the one, right? Like
correct. If you're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. Right, and his life story. So he's a very he's somebody I see as an inspiration, but at the same time, I only have Bakwas to give to the world, unlike him. So it's
Bakwaski.
Charles Bakwaski, not
Okay, that's
Bakowski.
Bakwaski. I see. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's Bakwaski. Yeah,
because
because
Bakwaski's
usually when I'm not talking about mycology and fungi, I'm just rambling about like bullshit, like just philosophical bullshit.
yeah. What advice would you give to somebody who's wanting to dive into this whole beautiful world of mushroom and fungi?
Right. So I first thing I advise is that uh, go out in the woods and look for fungi. Right. That's number one. Like just finding fungi is a very fascinating and rewarding activity on its own, and you don't need to know anything about that fungi. You just need to like go out in the woods and stumble upon some of them, right? And that sorts of lights a candle in your heart, then you want to do more about mushrooms. So I say go out in the woods, go search for fungi, try and bring those samples, try and identify those samples, and then try and talk to people, join groups which are mycology based. There are so many interest based groups on like Discord, Reddit, Facebook, Instagram. There's people who are posting about mycology. There's groups which are discussing things related to fungi. Just join those groups. Listen to the conversation that is happening there. See if if it interests you. And then you can start with like cultivation of basic fungi. So like oyster mushrooms are some of the most rewarding mushrooms to work with. You can use them to make biomaterials. You can grow them to make fruits. They're fast fruiters. They're pretty resistant to contamination. They can be used for soil remediation. Once it's done, you can use it as a compost for your soil. So you can start growing with oyster mushrooms. And once you've got the hang of that, I'm pretty sure after that you're just going to like be driven by this inner voice to just keep doing more and more. That's how it starts for most people. That's how it started for me. Yeah, once you're inoculated, there's a good chance you're gonna be working with fungi for a long time.
So, could you recommend also some good books, resources, or forum that could
Yes,
get me
absolutely.
started?
Absolutely. So, mushroom growing is a group on Facebook. It has about 50,000 people. Very, very, very experienced, very, 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 very new people also. So there's all sorts of discussion. The people who run those pages are very qualified to give out advices. In fact, they uh, constantly try to help and clear out questions for any newcomers. And once you join that group, you'll find another bunch of specialized, like somebody talking specifically about shiitake, somebody talking specifically about ganoderma, somebody talking specifically about muscaria, and there are specific groups for that. So that's there. And just go to Reddit and type mycology and see what comes. Join those groups. And as far as books are concerned, I highly, highly, highly recommend Radical Mycology by Peter McCoy and Fungal Pharmacy by Trad Cotter. Right, Trad Cotter is another very famous mycologist who's been working a lot on remediation, right? And then you can also go for Paul Stamets growing gourmet mushrooms and mycelium running, which are I think which are a little outdated because he wrote those books in 90s and haven't those books haven't been refreshed. So like a lot of methodology has changed and changed for the better. So, but it's still a great book for somebody who's starting a mushroom, like studying mushrooms to understand the basics of how to work with mushrooms and what fungal biology is like. So
And
yeah, so my top
some
three are
movies that have come out recently that like for a beginner
yes
it would be like easy to
on
watch?
yeah on Netflix. There's fantastic fungi. That's a great movie to watch. Then you can go and listen to Paul Stamets' lectures on fungi, his TED talks. He's had multiple podcasts. There's a great podcast by a company called Mushroom Revival. They hold these conversations with with some of the top mycologists and myco enthusiasts around the world, and each podcast is on a different subject related to. So for somebody who's interested in it, I think that is something that you should definitely check out.
Perfect. So that's it from my side. Thank you, Sharad. It has been an absolute
Thanks, Sid.
pleasure
Thanks for
talking to
having me
you.
over, man. Likewise, dude. Likewise. That's how I like to spend my evenings. I mean, well spent talking about mushrooms and fungi.